Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for your patience. And I know we'll have a few more coming in, and we are ripping through learning about a lot of information to help improve our programs. For this time, we have a special section that we want to make sure that everybody get a chance to hear about. So we were trying to let everyone get in as much as possible as they switch from one session to the other. But I will go ahead and get started. This year, the center is recognizing an inclusive business with the Inclusive Employer Award. Hopefully you can see it in the background. Yay! I hope you can see it from behind me. And so with this award, it really honors businesses that embrace inclusivity and diversity throughout their company, such as the mission statement, hiring practices, including hiring Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program students and completers, and team cohesiveness. Characteristics include a company where policies and practices support equity in the workplace. Opportunities are provided for our FPCTP employees to develop their skills and advance in the company, where diversity and inclusiveness are embraced, and where employees show respect to each other and appreciate the differences everyone brings to the workplace. We thank everyone for submitting nominations. We had quite a few. We had the challenge of deciding on one from among a great selection of employers. With great pleasure, we announced the 2020-21 Inclusive Employer of the Year Award, Unlocking Children's Potential, UCP Bells Academy Charter School. I'll give you a chance to do your little emojis, thanking them and congratulating them in our session. I'll tell you a little more. In the nomination, Tammy Johnson, who is part of the University of Central Florida's IES Inclusive Education Services Program, stated, over the past 4 years, UC Bells Academy has hosted 9 interns from UCF's Inclusive Education Services Program. 3 were employed upon graduation at the academy. 1 voluntarily moved to another position, taking the skills he gained at UCP Bells with him. 2 are still employed with them after 4 years and have become an integral part of their team. Another student who did her internship at UCP Bells, is employed at a similar school in her home area of Merritt Island. Mr. Brown has always been willing to provide positive and constructive feedback. He has always asked for suggestions and offered insight into challenges and awarded and encouraged milestones in intern development. His ability to have frank conversations and recognize potential have made UCP Bells Academy a stellar partner with our program, for our program. Mr. Roger Brown, who is the principal of the UCP Bells Academy, is with us today to accept this award. Mr. Brown, we thank you for being with us. We will arrange a time to present it to you in person at your school. So know that we are coming to your school and we have a physical award, but have this one in the back to show our appreciation for your work. Thank you for being an inclusive employer and supporting individuals with intellectual disabilities in the workplace. Would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you for this award. I would like to thank Tammy Johnson. She's been great working with her collaboratively as a charter school, consortium of charter schools that supports children with exceptionalities. We find it very, very rewarding and appropriate to work with employees, interns, that may have exceptionalities, and we embrace that, as everyone should have a place to work, regardless of their exceptionality or challenges. So we embrace it with our students, we embrace it with our employees, and we love our partnership with UCF. So again, thank you, Tammy, for your nomination. We appreciate it. And we thank you for this award today. This is a great milestone. Our teachers are excited. We've shared it with our students as well. So again, thank you so much. And we are honored to accept this award.
Thank you again. We look forward to actually presenting the award to you in person, to you and your school, and just are proud to have you as one of our trailblazers. And you are the inaugural, you are the first, you are the alpha to lead the way and model for other employers to consider and think about the benefits that our students bring. And more importantly, thinking about how you provide those work-based experiences during their time in our programs, and then going that extra mile and doing what is the right thing to do and employing those who are who meet your eligibility for contributing to your team. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Have a great day, everybody.
All right, thank you. Wow, that's super fantastic. Yay!
Wonderful.
That's just evidence of what our programs do and the connections they make as you guys establish your advisory councils and have your job coaches or job developers do outreach, and even just the connections that you have yourselves, and using those evidence-based and promising practices to make an inclusive program awesome and meaningful for our students to have independent living opportunities and gain employment to contribute in a way that they want to in our society. We do have some keynote presenters who are coming up who are going to do and volunteered actually, and so we're so glad they kept their word, volunteer in following up and providing us quite a little more information on the where we are right now with the accreditation standards, looking at inclusive post-secondary programs. Our panel is Deborah Hart and Stephanie Lee, who have been preparing since this summer, and actually before then, but since they made the promise to be here to share with you all, and I know that was well received, and many of you are looking forward to the information that they have to share, because as we have said before, we know that that is a pattern that we want to look at, those standards, as each one of our post-secondary programs are considering becoming accredited, meeting it. So we have a heads up and a step forward to get engaged in understanding how that process will work. Stephanie and Deborah, you have 2 minutes early, and if it's 2 minutes too early, we'll wait a minute if that works for you.
Oh, we're ready to go. Deborah's going to share her screen here.
Awesome, awesome. Okay. Without any further ado, we'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Deborah, how are you doing with the screen sharing? There we go.
My fingers aren't fast enough. Okay, let me move the window over so I can see. Okay, let's begin. Are you all set, Stephanie?
I'm ready.
Okay. I'm excited to be back here from the June presentation that I did, and to answer any more questions. Hopefully this next presentation will give you a little more substance on what the standards are. Not all of them that would be an entire day presentation, but just a taste of how this is evolving. And I'm going to begin. Okay, it appears I just have to click on the screen with actually a slide that I used the last time. Why are we doing this? Just to remind you and refresh your memory and give a context for the program accreditation. It's really useful for continuous quality improvement to begin to have a set of standards that in this case, it's across 10 topical areas with 38 actual standards to continuously try to improve the programs that you all are running. It's something that higher ed does. It's useful to college programs and obviously for accrediting agencies, but for students with intellectual disability and their parents, it gives them some indicators of what quality type of programs to be looking for. I think it lends more, it validates the programs, and it lends itself to the whole field being seen as more credible. Higher education programs are all about accreditation. Those of you in higher ed know accreditation and have a sense of it. In order to be aligned with that, it's imperative that this initiative, these programs be accredited. And I think last but certainly not least, Congress called for the establishment of accreditation via an accreditation work group that the National Coordinating Center has established since 2011. And each 5 years of funding we've done focused on different aspects of accreditation. This particular round from 2020 is on establishing a process for the accreditation, but it's really important. I think I'll go back to the validation and credibility that it offers. What I forgot to say is if anybody has a question, put it in the chat. We'll try to answer as we go along. It's rather difficult, but we're going to try. Here's the process. This is draft. This is what the work group has established thus far. And you can see we're at step 1. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Step 1 is to establish pre-accreditation tools, and I'm going to review them towards the end of this presentation. And it's really, if you look through each of these steps, and I'm not going to go through each one, but you'll see this is not dissimilar with other accreditation processes. It starts out really when a self-assessment, an individual will attend a pre-accreditation technical assistance workshop to begin to really focus on what the standards are and where one's particular program is into the self-assessment. And there will be a process for the self-assessment as well, and a collection of evidence. And then that self-assessment is submitted for the accreditation, and the accrediting organization reviews it at that point to determine if the program is prepared for accreditation. I know we want to have a process that is really collaborative in nature and not like a "we gotcha" kind of approach to this. That would be the last thing we want. So we're trying to be deliberate about making sure that the process we design really lends itself to that type of collaborative nature. Now, so once the self-study is completed, it's the accreditation entity really assigns peer reviewers to actually conduct a site visit. And I think that's a key step in this process. That the next step is there is a site visit that's completed, and then that information is compiled into a report, and recommendations are made both to the program and to the board members that make accreditation determination. So you see, we're just at the very beginning of this. So, but we're hoping by the end of the five-year cycle here, which now we've started year 2, that we will be making really some progress along this process and refining it. I think it's evolutionary in its nature. I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie. I'm going to get you onto the next.
Well, thank you, Deborah. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. By way of a bit of background, I first became interested in inclusive post-secondary education when my daughter Laura, who had Down syndrome, was in high school and wanted to go to college. We were lucky that George Mason University agreed to start a pilot. Soon after that, I was appointed director of the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, in the U.S. Department of Education, and had the opportunity to fund model programs and to promote the concept, which was new to many people then. After leaving the department in 2005, I worked with Madeline Will on developing model programs in New Jersey and other states. And our friends in Florida asked me to speak at the Florida Down Syndrome Conference in 2007, a very large conference of folks from all over the state, about how to develop and fund programs and state coalitions. At the time, there were no programs in Florida. After the conference, I was pleased to take a group, including prospective parents, program staff, University of North Florida professionals, and a school district representative to visit the programs in New Jersey. And what you all have accomplished since 2007 is just simply amazing. And it's so exciting to hear about it at the conference. Now, Deborah has presented to you in June about the accreditation, and I'm just going to put in a couple of background things by way of reminders. I was pleased to chair the first 2 5-year work groups. And as you may know, in the first 5 years, we developed the model standards aligned with the federal requirements for accrediting agencies. We obtained public input from almost 1,000 people, refined the standards, and then issued the first report to Congress, the Secretary of Education, and the SECI. Then during the second 5 years, we field tested the standards, obtained more public input, made revisions, and added guidance and review requirements for each standard, as well as specific recommendations to Congress and the Secretary. The slide that you're seeing now is the cover of the 2021 report to Congress and the Secretary, and I would encourage all of you to read that, at least read the executive summary and the standards, guidance, and review requirements. We've included a link in the WOVA app. Next, Deborah. All of the standards are very important. Today, we're going to highlight a few of the standards we think will have particular interest to you, along with some examples of those standards. And when we provide examples, we're not suggesting that you follow exactly what the examples are. We're just trying to give an example of what a standard might look like. So the 3 standards that we're going to be focusing on are related to person-centered planning, a satisfactory academic progress policy that includes criteria for evaluating student progress, academics, socialization, independent living, and career employment areas, and program level student learning outcomes. Next slide. So this is curriculum standard 2. The program utilizes and documents a person-centered planning approach that provides for maximum choice for the student within the inclusive program of study. And Deborah, would you go to the next slide? We've pulled a little bit of the guidance for this curriculum out to further explain it. As noted here, and this is just sections from the guidance, person-centered planning is used as a framework to plan activities, courses, supports, problem solving, and so on, that include specific goals that serve as an action plan to achieve a student's vision for his or her future. A variety of planning tools may be used for person-centered planning. If the tool results in a graphic or partial sentences, then the PCP must also be written out in understandable plain language. The PCP is intended to be a living document. One of the things that we found in the field test is that at times a person-centered plan might be done when a student first enters the program and then go in the drawer, and that's not really helpful. I do want to emphasize, though, that the PCP requirement is not intended to create bureaucratic requirements. We're not trying to recreate IEPs in higher education. Rather, the intent is to have the student's educational experience guided by a student-focused plan with specific goals and action steps. The PCP must include a description of what works for the student, including learning strategies, accommodations, and individualized supports and services. There is no expectation or requirement that the PCP be a lengthy document. Next. I'd like to thank Danny Roberts-Dom for providing this example of a PCP that uses the STAR process, which I understand a number of you use. Note that this PCP includes the key areas that we focus on throughout the standards: academic enrichment, career development, independent living, self-determination, and campus and community engagement. It's also built around the students' interests, strengths, goals, and vision for the future, which is what we want to see in a person-centered plan. Now, as a follow-up, as the guidance indicates, since this PCP results in graphics and partial sentences, it would need to be translated into a document that's written in understandable plain language. We've included the PowerPoint slides on the WOVA app, so I won't be reading every word on every slide. I don't think that would be useful, but would encourage you to take a look at those after the conference. Next. Next, we have the Student Achievement Standard that deals with SAPs. The program has established a satisfactory academic progress SAP policy that includes criteria for evaluating student progress in academic, socialization, independent living, and career development, and the impact of such evaluation on student advancement toward program completion. This program specifies how students advance through a full course of study and maintain satisfactory academic progress. Now, note that the federal definition of SAP addresses only measures of a student's academic progress. Based on substantial public input and the requirements in the Higher Education Opportunity Act, SAP for these programs must also address measurement of students in these other areas. Next. When we first started working on developing model program standards 11 years ago, and we held focus groups with programs and talked with them about how do they measure progress towards goals, the field was still at a very embryonic stage. Ideas at that time included keeping track of students being on time to class, whether or not they're attending class and so on. But few programs in the focus group had really thought out how to develop progress measures about what the student is expected, that specific student is expected to learn and be able to do, and how to plan, individualize, and measure progress in each of these areas. Now, we've seen a lot of progress in the past 11 years and know that this can still be a challenge for many. Thanks again to Danny Robert-Stom for providing this example of a SAP. We have several slides with this SAP on it, and I'm not going to read the entire document to you, but I want to point out several things. Note that it starts with a reference to person-centered planning and how that impacts the SAP. It clearly discusses how goals will be planned and measured for the individual students, includes a SAP rubric to measure progress on goals, and it's aligned with the university SAP policy. Next slide. So when you have a chance to read through this yourself, you'll see that there are performance indicators that are measured and monitored, and action plans, specific goals and objectives for a student. Next. And it covers each of the areas that we've been talking about, which is so important. So for instance, in career development and employment, they look at work-based learning and or internship attendance, supervisor evaluations, attendance, engagement with career center activities, monthly communication with the YAR counselors and or the employment liaison. And the next, this slide, and I think the next one, really shows how it aligns with the university SAP policy. Next slide. I want to discuss, and again, this is alignment with the typical information that would be in, part of the university SAP policy. Next. This is the rubric that this program uses, and you can see it's very specific in terms of determining whether or not the student meets the minimum expectations, meets expectations, or exceed expectations in each area. And one of the things that's very nice about this, as you look through what they're doing, you can see how the person-centered planning aligns with the individual goals and progress measurement for the student, how it all aligns with the university SAP, and that there's a specific way to measure progress. Next. When Meg Riegel from Think College and I presented the first report to Congress's Secretary and NASIKI, when we presented that to the NASIKI board, which is the board that advises the Secretary of Education on accreditation, they were very complimentary about the standards, but the one recommendation they had is that we really needed to be addressing student learning outcomes, which had not been addressed in the first 5 years. So we spent some time on this, and the new standard that was developed says that the program has established a program level, notice it's program level, student learning outcomes, assessment plan, and a process that allows it to measure student achievement in varied domains. And again, we're looking at academic, socialization, independent living, and career development. Next. Carol Britton Laws, this is a quote from her. Carol was a member of the last work group and is on the current work group and has focused much of her professional work on program level student learning outcomes. And as you can see from this quote, these SLOs are clear, concise, measurable statements that describe what a student should know and be able to do at the completion of their program. Next slide. There also needs to be an SLO assessment plan that includes written student learning outcomes, a description of the methods used to assess the extent to which the SLOs are met, the data that will be collected and analyzed annually, and a schedule for conducting continuous assessments. Next slide. Carol also provided us with this example. She's the director of Destination Dogs at the University of Georgia. It's a little fuzzy, but you can see here that it has specific competencies, which is the way they've developed their SLOs, in things like self-awareness, decision-making skills, goal setting, planning skills. Then there's a description of the competency and a chart with a way to note in various areas if the student is meeting expectations for those. I think that's my last slide, Deborah, and I'll turn it back over to you.
You'd think with all the time I spend on Zoom, I wouldn't do that anymore. Talk when I'm muted. Thank you, Stephanie. I hope people have a bit more sense that the level of detail that's going to be required and what needs to be collected as evidence to demonstrate that you meet the standard is the intent here. Let's see, find my cursor. In order to assist you in getting accreditation ready, if you will, in that mindset, we've developed some resources and tools to help prepare you. These are voluntary. Nothing that I'm going to talk about in these 4 additional tools is mandated. So don't freak out and think, oh my God, I have to do all this. It's just meant to help. There's a more user-friendly or introductory overview of the 10 areas for accreditation and the related standards, of which there are 38 to that particular area. And I'm going to show you examples of each one of these. There's a pre-accreditation self-assessment, so you can start to get used to and see where you are in terms of where you might have need. And I think from my perspective, the evidence checklist will probably help you the most in identifying where you need to focus more in terms of collecting this evidence and developing it in many cases. And then we have developed a system of folders, really, and it's, again, all volunteer. If it helps you, great. If you use any of these and you improve upon them, let us know so we can put it up on our website and have it available to other folks. Here's the link on our website to where these items are. If for whatever reason you have difficulty with that link, just shoot me an email and I will try to take care of that as ASAP. This is the simplified or user-friendly version of the standards, areas, and the related standards. This is the next instrument that's designed to help you really begin to look at whether, if you look at the status scale down at the bottom, meet standard, that means you have evidence to demonstrate that you're really in compliance and have all the elements that are required. Down to the middle ones and down to the last one, a 1, you haven't even begun to think of it yet. So I think it's important. You can see on the next what it looks like. Here's the mission standard 1. So you would rate yourself a 4 or a 1 all the way to a 1, and probably, if you so desired, make some comments here. I think mission standard 1 looks at the program has a written mission statement that is consistent with the Higher Education Act requirements that the program is a degree, certificate, or non-degree program and an accredited institute that is designed to support students with intellectual disabilities, and on and on. The second standard 2, I think, is where most programs might have some need, where it says the written mission statement is communicated to prospective and current students, family, staff, faculty, and the public, and is reviewed at least every 3rd year or sooner if there are significant changes to the program. I'm not sure, well, I am sure most programs probably, although Florida is different, you folks are way ahead of the curve, but nationally speaking, I don't think most programs are there yet. Any questions on this? I think it's pretty straightforward. The evidence checklist here. Evidence is collected and available. It's not available, but it would be easy to get or create, or you need to develop it. This is really, I think, a good team activity where you can divide up some of the standard areas and review it and come together at different professional development times to take a look at where you all are at and what you want to prioritize. Again, these are just meant as tools for a self-evidence check or self-assessment. Any questions? Chat is empty. Accreditation standards repository. These are, I think you could have it on OneDrive, a Google Drive. I just took a screenshot to show it. There are the 10 folders for the 10 accreditation standard areas. And this is just meant to help you as a storage or organizational tool. This is a refresher on how the standards could be used now. We talk about continuous quality improvement, and certainly that's one of the key things that they're useful for. I think when students and families are searching for what college program they would like to participate in, the standards can at least establish a minimum quality. I think it's useful to find out what institutes of higher ed that your host institute of higher ed, what's already being used for accreditation purposes. And you wouldn't even need the accreditation repository that I just showed you, because you would use your own. And I've been told that almost every institute of higher ed has one. I haven't confirmed that yet. So, I think it's going to be important for programs to establish, if they haven't already, a data collection system within the program. As Stephanie talked about this in her presentation, student learning outcomes are a critical area. And I'm pretty sure that not all of programs are, I know they all have student learning outcomes, but I'm not sure the documentation is there or the evidence of that. So that's an area to either create or update. Here's one where I would fail, I can guarantee you. Ensure that all program policies, procedures, and handbooks are updated. That would not be a strength of mine. So I'm just, it's something, you do it once and you consider it done. But in terms of accreditation, it would be check to see that it is updated. Again, as I mentioned before, I don't try to look at this, all the standards at one time and assess your program. I think that's overwhelming. I would encourage you to take more of a team approach and break it up into specific areas and begin to review, either using one of the tools that I presented or some other internal policy or instrument you so desire. But I think the sooner folks can start familiarizing themselves with what's required in the standards, the easier this whole process will be. And I think what's kind of cool is that we as a field have time right now to begin to look at this as an activity, is a positive activity. Over the next 4 years, we're going to be piloting the process that I showed you at the beginning and recruiting programs. If any of you should be interested in volunteering for the pilot, please just email me. And we have criteria. We have to finalize that criteria. And once we do, I'll make sure Drew and Janice have that so you can see it. But if you want to be on the list, just really let me know. And I think it's going to be critical that we get a lot of feedback in the pilot and from the public in general and programs in particular, so that we end up with a process that works for people and that isn't punitive or overly burdensome. I think that's going to be critical. And then we're going to be refining and finalizing the whole process that I presented. Maybe some of the steps won't be there. Maybe there'll be additional ones or different ones. It's going to be imperative that we really have a system that works for the field. And that can only happen if we get feedback from everyone. And finally, we will be providing the process, the standards, and everything else that is developed to a newly developed accrediting organization. And we're going to be working hard on either developing one, or so far we have not been able to identify one that's a reasonable fit for all of this work. We wanted to make sure to allocate enough time and for questions, thoughts.
There is one question in the chat.
There is, okay, let's see.
For the 4 domains mentioned, does each course need to have a component addressing each domain for SAP?
No, the program as a whole should address each component, not each course.
Thank you, Stephanie. Don't be shy. We've been waiting for this time. Unmute yourself.
You can unmute yourself. You don't have to write it in chat.
Yeah.
How you doing? Pretty good. So I'm assuming you heard my voice now. I'm calling from the FIU Embrace program. I'm the clinical program manager. So I was calling to see if we would be able to schedule an interview for the open CA position that we have. Okay, give me just 1 second.
I think we've been bombed. I don't think that had anything to do with us. Okay, there's another question.
So I have time tomorrow and on Monday.
Thank you, Lindsay, for muting. Let's see. how does FCSUA plan to use this upcoming process for their approval of program in Florida? Well, Drew has been part of the team and we are working side by side with them in every way. We haven't made a decision because we haven't seen the complete layout, but we are part of the team and in the process along with them. And as soon as we have specifics of how that advisory group is working, Drew and I will pass that along to the rest of our programs and the rest of the state. Thanks for asking though, but we're right there with them.
Absolutely. Drew has been at every meeting and we're at the point now where this newer work group is at the point of completing a guidance manual, which will accompany the actual standards that I think is going to be critical to implementation of these. It's a lot of hard work has gone in. Stephanie, I know you're on one group that's
We've
really
been developing the guidance manual. The guidance manual that Deborah's talking about has taken we're not changing the standards or the guidance that's been reported, but we're looking at the review requirements and seeing if there's some additional requirements for review that would be helpful to the process. And we're just about ready to report that out to the full work group that Drew's a member of. And Deborah, I see we have another question. So does this mean that each program will need to be accredited then if this is approved? It will be up to each college, university, community college to make a decision as to whether or not they use the accreditation process. There's no requirement in the law that every program has to be accredited. We think that there's a growing interest in accreditation. In the last work group, we did a survey. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was about 80% of the respondents, and there were around 100 respondents. About 80% of the programs said that they were highly likely or likely to want to become accredited. And Deborah, there's a question, what is the expected time frame for piloting and so on?
Oh, good question. Thank you for letting me know that, Stephanie. I was hoping to start the pilot this year. I've had to revise those expectations. I think we'll be starting probably in the fall of 2022 as we move forward, maybe a little earlier. And I believe the pilot will take a year to a year and a half. But the results of it will probably take the full 2 years. Any other questions?
This is Margot from Ohio State, and
Oh, Margot. Hey,
Margaret,
how are
how'd you
you?
get in here?
I'm a facilitator. So
good.
anyways, I have heard you say before that the standards are like the gold benchmark and no program can meet all the standards at the perfect level where they have evidence. Do you have a sense of what percentage of the standards would need to be met to actually pass accreditation?
Well, let me take that one, Deborah. Actually, and I know we've been in a lot of the same sessions, Margot, I see it as 3 levels. The kind of the lowest level is getting the Department of Education approval of a program as a CTP so students can get financial aid. They have to meet the basic requirements in the law. Then these accreditation standards are meant to be a sufficient level of quality that the program, the institution, families, students will feel comfortable that it's a sufficient level of quality. When I've referred to a gold standard, I'm really talking about what would be the ultimate best practice. And Think College is about to come out with a new guiding principles and best practice document that's a higher standard than these model accreditation standards. So
They're more aspirational.
More
in nature.
aspirational, right? If you could do everything you possibly could, that would be, the best practice. These standards, I think that most programs would have some work to do to meet these standards. And I think that it's work that most people would recognize as important work to do. The way program accreditation works is that in order to be accredited, all of the standards need to be met in response to your question. But it is intended to be a collaborative process and a back and forth and an opportunity to make improvements. And if a program, for instance, met most of the standards, but there were a few areas that needed improvement, then the way the accreditation process typically works is that a plan would be developed and agreed to reach that standard within a certain amount of time. I think it's usually 2 years, and provisional accreditation could be awarded. So we still need to work out the details for this process, but that's the way it typically works.
And I think that's what the pilot will inform us of.
Mhm.
So that we're working with people in the field to look at what are those timelines, or if we're going with a conditional approval, which I would be in favor of.
Mhm. Well, let me throw out a question, since we don't have a question right now, and we did leave plenty of time for discussion. What do you all think about this accreditation? Do you think this is a good idea? Is it something that you're interested in doing? Is there more information you'd like?
Intimidating.
Yes. Well, and I think that Deborah's point about picking a few areas and using the tools that Think College has developed is the way to start. It's not so intimidating if you think, okay, I'm going to start with the SAP, or I'm going to start with a written mission statement or whatever, and then build on that. It's less intimidating than thinking, I've got 38 standards I need to figure out.
I think you're right, Stephanie. I mean, start small and take it one at a time, or use a team approach, as I mentioned before, but do not try to look at them all at once and pull everything together. I think I would be overwhelmed, and, I'm familiar with them.
I think the other piece is that many of the programs in Florida are really well ahead of others in the country, because you've been working so hard and in a consortium now for a number of years and have had models of good practice. You've all been working on person-centered planning. You've really been doing a lot of what needs to be done already to meet the standards.
The work of the Florida Center is amazing in terms of how Florida in particular has moved forward in program development and just getting the information out to people and bringing people together, like at this event. I think that that's critical. And I'm sure you'll be hosting meetings around other meetings that are even more in-depth on accreditation.
I'd like to pitch an idea here. I think it's really exciting that we're looking at standards. It's hard to envision the development of a professional action group. I don't mean a group, but to continue to move forward in the absence of a set of standards. All right, so that's the yin. Now let me go to the yang. Having spent enormous amount of time and effort with SACS, NCATE, CAPE, K-Prep, and APA, and other bodies that go through similar accreditation efforts. An enormous amount of time and energy can be spent preparing portfolios rather than delivering programs. And I hope as we go forward, I reviewed the reports last night. I'm very impressed. You guys did enormously cool work. My fear is that we'll forget the rule of simplicity. And what I've seen with programs that I've been both reviewed, but also prepared in the past, we'll see a waste. I know that's a loaded word. A contribution of a lot of time and effort that doesn't assist the program. So, you know, as we go forward with a movement to really move this whole thing forward in very cool ways, I hope we don't end up with such a complicated system that smaller programs that are always fighting for sustainable funding end up doing what many teacher preparation programs do, counselor preparation programs do, psych prep programs do, which is they end up creating a position within their own program just for assessment and accreditation. I just hope we can keep it simple enough that normal human beings can operate.
Michael, I really appreciate your comments. I think we're hoping to have a process that is not overly burdensome. I want people to want to use it. So I welcome you as this task unfolds, the pilot and all of the stuff we're doing. Please participate, or at a minimum, give us feedback in the spirit of your comments just now, because it's going to be critical that your voice is heard.
Well, I would agree, Michael, and that's something that we have worked very hard to keep in mind throughout this process. And you know how work groups and committees go. Sometimes people think, oh, well, let's ask for this and let's do that. And there's always been at least one I've been chairing, and Martha Mock is the chair now and is taking the same approach. Wait a minute, let's think about what's feasible as well as what's desirable and make sure that there's a happy medium there. Great comment. Anyone else have any thoughts? Do you think that that accreditation will help you within your institution with validity, support, sustainability? I'm seeing an absolutely and a great idea. This is, of course, one of the challenges we have as a field is we've really been retrofitting students with intellectual disability into college and university and community college systems that have been established for years. And one of the things that we hear is that accreditation will help show that a program does have a sufficient level of quality and is important to be a part of the institution.
And Michael's comment in the chat, it has potential for sustainability. It certainly speaks to what you're saying.
We also had a comment about the guidance manual and how it really could contribute to the notion of the process being perceived as doable and useful. Thank you. And so looking forward to that.
It will have examples of what the evidence could look like. And it's just examples. Yeah. It's not a requirement that you do it that way. So, but we heard from individuals loud and clear that they wanted examples. So we're going to make sure that we're providing that for each of the standards.
Right.
And you know that you're working on that with us, Drew.
Well, if there are no more questions, we certainly want to thank both you, Stephanie, and Deborah, for your time, for sharing this valuable and such critical information with everyone, and being our panel keynotes this afternoon as we draw soon to the end of our Florida Post-Secondary Education Program Planning Institute. What a
There
great
is one more question.
Okay.
In developing, have you thought about how it would apply to technical colleges?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great question.
Or
And
maybe
you know
for
who,
response?
guess who's helping us make sure that it does? That's one of Drew's major contribution, well, many contributions, but that is one of the major ones that he'll be working with us on. So a lot of the examples will include those from career technical programs.
And if we, I think we have another minute or two. Deborah, perhaps you'd like to share about the new center at Think College that's going to have a specific focus on career and technical, the network.
Oh, excellent. I'm like,
I've been
Stephanie
trying it
talking
here for
about-
3 years.
I've put that out off my mind for today's conversation. We're really pleased to have been awarded for October 1st, a new 3-year, which will most likely be a 4-year center, national center. We're calling it the Think College Network. And the Florida Center is a key partner in that particular center. And as we were talking about, Drew is going to be the lead for our we're having 2 collaborative work groups. One is specifically on career technical education. We identified that as an area because we're well aware nationally that career technical education has been a real challenge for folks across the country. And Florida, as it does in many areas, excels in this particular area. Drew and Janice and folks and Paula, as the past lead on the Florida Center, did a super job getting career technical education institutions and programs on board. So he's going to be leading the country in that movement. We're hoping to establish a 7 regional network across the country to help organize and disseminate information as this field evolves. Much like the Association of Higher Education and Disability AHEAD organization, it's not the same regional structure. It most likely will be different. There are some existing, 2 of the existing ones are the Southeast, SEPSI, Inclusive Higher Education or Post-Secondary Programs, and MIPSA is the central one out of Missouri. And their partners, we're going to try to replicate the Georgia model, the Southeast model, in terms of establishing these newer regional entities across the country. And the collaborative work groups that Drew is leading, the career technical ed, and Liz Getzel from Virginia Commonwealth University will be leading the second one, which is around employment partnerships. So they'll be working within those regions nationally. So we're real excited to look at areas that the areas identified for the Think College Network Center are new areas that the coordinating center doesn't have the ability to address, and we're not identified in our scope of work. So these are brand new areas, and I'm excited to move it forward. We're just in the process of hiring right now. And for those of you in institutes of higher education, you know what a beast that can be in terms of the bureaucracy and how long you have to post things for. So it's going to be well into 2022 before we get everything going. But stay tuned.
And Deborah, we've had the sepsia website link has been posted in the chat here. And also Margot.
Oh, great. Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, and Margot has a comment that she's observed the Florida teams working so hard with the transition tool. It would be great to adjust the tool so that as they work through the tool, they're completing the standards as well. So that's not really a comment for us. It's more for Drewlin.
That's certainly already been our discussion. We've already been discussing that because we want everything to align and things to work smoothly together.
Well, let us know if we can be of any
Thank you.
assistance.
And we've been talking, I know in particular with Janice, we've been really looking to try to coordinate this more.
Which gets to Michael's point about not duplicating, but trying to find ways to simplify.
And just to remind those folks that may be new, whenever the online strategic tool was developed, Dr. Kohler's taxonomy for transition, as well as the Think College benchmarks were used along with Dr. Lyman Dukes and colleagues' research that on student success in post-secondary education were the three elements that were used. So what we have is aligned with what previously Think College had as their benchmarks. And now that they're going to be, as we said, there are going to be some new standards. So we're going to certainly be including those so that the online strategic planning tool can be one place that folks can go and can know that they sort of have everything there in one place. So we'll certainly be looking at how that supports this whole process.
Well, that brings me back to my original comment. It's just amazing what's been done in Florida in the last 14 years when I was there talking about it. And people are like, really? Go to college? That sounds good.
It's exciting to be in a state where we have so much state support, and the fact that our Senate and House has passed this legislation that provides this amazing support, and the center. I mean, we have a wonderful opportunity here.
You sure do. Well, I think we've responded to all the questions, Deborah, unless there's something else. No?
Oh, great. Margot, thank you for including the link to the Midwest Post-Secondary Alliance. And the other one is there. Excellent.
Great.
Great.
Well, we've enjoyed being with you all. Your conference has been wonderful. I've been listening in on some of it, and congratulations on all your good work.